2020. And before we start, I just want to note, I mentioned a few times in the episode that this is the first ever video episode, at least the version that's on YouTube. That was the plan, and we did record video, but there were some technical issues, including the fact that my face was way too close to the computer for about half of it. It kind of looks like a horror movie. So I may release the video at some point, but I think the version that goes on YouTube will just be the audio. I hope that's okay. Anyway, please enjoy the episode. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren, and this is our very first video also podcast, if it works out. It's available on the normal audio channels, but if you go to YouTube, you'll be able to actually see us in person. And what better guest for this very first video episode than my current guest, Larry Sanger, who is an internet entrepreneur and former professor of philosophy, although he's best known as the co-founder of Wikipedia in 2001 alongside Jimmy Wales. Though, to be fair, he now prefers to be called Wikipedia's ex-founder. Still, I think it's safe to say he is one of the people without whom this podcast probably wouldn't exist. Larry is also the author of a new book, Essays on Free Knowledge, The Origins of Wikipedia and the New Politics of Knowledge, which includes essays from the last 20 years about topics like Wikipedia, the nature of neutrality and bias, the perils of big tech, his previous ventures like Citizendium, and his latest projects, the Knowledge Standards Foundation and the Encyclosphere. It's my great honor to have Larry Sanger on the podcast. Larry, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Yaron. I appreciate it.
So, first of all, where are you located?
Central Ohio.
Oh, great.
Flyover country.
Sorry?
Flyover country.
Well, that's what some people say, yes. We were actually going to have our Enterprise Mediawiki conference in Sandusky near Cleveland, if it hadn't been canceled. Hope to get there before too long.
Nice.
I'm not even sure where to start. There's so much to talk about, but so you and Jimmy Wales, of course, co-created Wikipedia. You have a whole essay in the book about the early history of Wikipedia, which I believe you wrote in 2005.
Right. Well, I revised it a bit, edited it, and added a lot of notes from 2020 in the footnotes. So.
Yeah. I read the book, by the way, and the footnotes throughout are quite interesting to see. Your changed perspective, or in some case reinforced perspective on some of these issues. I don't want to get too much into the early history of Wikipedia because there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, and people can read the book if they want to hear all the details. But I was surprised actually at how involved you were. I knew you were the one who suggested to Jimmy to use a wiki for this, for the encyclopedia, for the new version of Newpedia, I guess. And I knew that you were the one who came up with the name Wikipedia. But I didn't know that you had also come up with important early guidelines like Be Bold and what Wikipedia is not, and ignore all rules. And I didn't know that the name Wiktionary was your idea also.
Yep, it's all true. Well, if you get the early history of Wikipedia from certain sources, then you won't know any of that. But I was the leader of the project. The title that I gave myself was project organizer, and that's what I did. That was my job, is my full-time job. Jimmy Wales was busy as CEO of Bombus. This was just a little side project for him.
Yeah. This is a Mediawiki podcast, so I do want to ask about that. Yeah, you left the project in early 2002, which I think was a few months before Wikipedia started using the software that we now know as Mediawiki. But did you have any influence over the software?
Yeah, well, it actually got its start in 2001. So we started by using UseModWiki, which I guess is still out there, still available, not
Yeah.
maintained by Clifford Adams. Um, but by the summer, it had been actually after just a few months, it had become clear that that UseModWiki was just not working out, didn't have all the functionality we needed, and the maintainer, the author and maintainer of UseModWiki, it's just another software package, just wasn't interested in supplying all of the features that we needed. So Magnus Manske actually was the first to basically rewrite wiki software for us with a new syntax from scratch. And I do not recall when that was rolled out for the very first time. I want to say it was the summer of 2001
Oh, really?
or
Okay.
fall. I think so, or the fall. But I can't be sure. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, you can look it up, of course. Um, but but I remember it for sure. And I remember being very happy, and I remember fielding some questions um, from Magnus, and then later from Lee Daniel Crocker, from both of them. I remember that after Magnus wrote it, Lee, who I actually met in person, I think it was when I gave the first speech about Wikipedia at Stanford in January of 2002. Um, I think we met up for lunch around that time, and I think he was busy actually working on it, on the rewrite at that time, if I'm not mistaken, of Magnus's original code, which was a little bit spaghetti code. I think he's gotten a lot better, Magnus. He's gotten degrees and stuff since then, since those days. Um, and I really enjoyed working with Magnus. And Lee's a nice guy too. I cannot tell you to tell the absolute truth what sort of input I had. I remember I think I was on the Tools L mailing list, which was the mailing list for software development. I think I would have weighed in a few times there. You can actually see in the archives and see if that's true. But I remember chatting with those guys, and also with the system administrators who are behind the scenes, and just like getting everything in place. But I wasn't like a project manager, though. I wouldn't say that was quite my role. It was kind of partly a little bit. I was sort of the project owner more than anything. I was the guy who was saying, "Okay, this is good. Let's go with it."
Right,
Uh,
right. Well, yeah, I mean, right. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that you would be providing, the or trying to provide the user perspective on
Yeah,
all of this
but
stuff.
a lot of that stuff was them, 100% them, because they were users. They were heavy users, and they knew what we needed. It was obvious. We just had to like list off, okay, these are what we wanted. And I vaguely remember adding a lot of bug reports and I always even asked once or twice to like prioritize this list of features. I seem to remember doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think two of the big innovations, technical innovations that Wikipedia had over other wikis were talk pages, or the whole concept of namespaces, but especially talk pages,
Right.
and templates. And I think you talk about, if I'm not mistaken, I think you talk about talk pages at least in the book, but I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, were you involved in either of those concepts?
I, to tell you the truth, I think I wrote in the book itself that I came up with the idea for talk pages. I'm not, I think I've been contradicted by someone on that point. So, my memory is not 100% clear, so I'm not gonna claim make a definite claim on that. But I do definitely remember insisting that we needed to separate the article from the rest, and the whole idea, because UseMod Wiki had subpages, right?
Oh, okay.
And so the subpages were created by just having a slash in the URL or in the page title that would actually create a subpage. And then so it was, there would be an article, George Washington slash talk.
I see.
Yeah, and I think I was definitely one of the first people. I was one of the guys who was enforcing that and getting that into use, and telling people don't put your comments about articles in line of the articles. Let the articles sit on their own, and all talk should go on a separate page, which is just obvious now. But back then, you have to realize that the sort of habits that people got into in writing wiki encyclopedias were all just extensions of pre-existing habits that actually had existed for 6 years prior. I mean, the first wiki was made in, I think, 1995.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was this whole culture that had evolved in time, and a fair number, a small minority, but still a fair and influential number of the early Wikipedians were had arrived from the wiki world, the broader wiki world, and so they kind of started bringing some of their habits there. And I had to tell them, well, we're not writing wiki pages exactly in the sense that you mean them. It's more, and there is a thing, a concept called document mode versus thread mode in the original wiki web, the Portland pattern repository wiki, which is the original wiki. The wiki web had that distinction, and that actually is very similar to like the article talk page distinction. But yeah, we used it. We didn't let articles evolve out of a discussion. I think some people were expecting us to do that, some of the wiki people, but yeah, there was no point as far as I could tell. It's just we're writing articles here. We're not writing discussions and then letting articles emerge.
Right.
And one of the reasons for that probably is I remember somebody actually had written. This is something that the guy who introduced me to the wiki concept, Ben Kovitz, had himself worked on something like an encyclopedia wiki before this.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think there's something, I think it was, I want to say the God wiki, except I don't think it wasn't just about theology. And maybe I'm mixing up two different wikis. I'm pretty sure there was a God wiki out there. Maybe it still exists. But I think there was another wiki encyclopedia, except it wasn't a serious encyclopedia. It was just like another everything two. It was sort of like everything two in wiki form. And they weren't really even trying to make an encyclopedia. It was just topics, sort of random stuff. And so I think one or two people from that community had joined Wikipedia. And I'm just dredging up these old things here that I haven't thought of in literally 20 years.
Yeah.
But I think that's right. I think there are some people who arrived from that other wiki who would have, and then would have said, okay, we should start with document, or we should start with what did they call it again? Not discussion mode. It's
thread
anyway,
mode or
thread mode. Start with thread mode, and then it will switch into document mode.
Oh,
there
I get
was very early discussions about that. I remember that.
Yeah. Um, well, I guess it sort of makes sense for the case of Wiki Web, where they're talking about software patterns and stuff, and it's they're sort of formulating the ideas at the same time that they're writing them down.
Yeah, actually, yeah, sure, of course, it makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of writing mode, rhetorical practice. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what people do now with Google Docs, I guess. I mean,
Sometimes, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating. Thinking. You're basically inventing a whole world from scratch. Well, not totally from scratch, but.
Yeah. I thought of it as a bulletin board.
Sorry.
Yeah. I thought of it as a bulletin board. It's a series of bulletin boards. And I was
Right.
thinking, oh, this is just a blank series of bulletin boards. What the heck can I do with it? Right? And so I realized very, very early on that I was not constrained by the habits of the culture that had sprung up around the wiki tool. That it was possible to just use the bare software, the bare capabilities of the software, and that's something that I pretty deliberately did. It's we're going to come up with our own habits and our own ways of doing things, because I mean, basically, a wiki was a wiki back then. Before 2001, a wiki was a kind of thing. It's like, and they were all imitations of the original Portland pattern repository. And then when Wikipedia came along, I said, okay, an encyclopedia is not a wiki. An encyclopedia is a different kind of thing. We are going to try to use a wiki to write an encyclopedia. And then it was just a matter of like figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So here we are. 20 years later with a whole new set of rules and ideological hardliners and so forth later.
yeah.
Before we get to that, why did you decide to come out with this book now?
Well, I guess a couple of things. One is the 20th anniversary of Wikipedia was coming up. That definitely figured into the calculation. Another is I've been thinking of writing an essay collection like that since like 2008, so for a long time. And I don't know. I just got tired of seeing all these other people with books and feeling left out.
Sure.
I've written a number of book-length manuscripts before. My dissertation, this book, How and Why I Taught My Toddler to Read. That's like 130 pages long. It's free on my website on larrysanger.org. Another thing that I'm thinking of of publishing that I wrote back in 1998.
Whoa.
This is it's an introduction to philosophy.
Wow.
So one quarter when I was teaching as a grad student at Ohio State, I decided to write out all of my lectures word for word and read them to my students. And I was looking at this. I just came across this not too long ago. It's 350 pages, manuscript pages long, like this.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, and it's readable. It's definitely it's an okay introduction to philosophy. I was thinking of editing it and getting it out there. Why not? I'm also writing a book called God Exists, but I'm not sure if I'm ever going to publish it. So we'll see about that one.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I might end up publishing a version of it, a later version, but not the one that I'm working on now. It's kind of, yeah. Anyway.
Okay. That all right. Wow. That one sounds quite interesting. There's no question mark in the title. It's a
No.
declarative statement. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's great. I mean, yeah. I hope you do publish some or all of those. Yeah. Um, and this current book is self-published. I believe not there's anything wrong with that. I self-published my book too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was told by one expert at Purdue that I should, MIT Press would easily publish it if I had asked them to, and said that's just too much trouble. So I decided not to. I just want to get it over with, and it's been too much work and trouble as it is. Um, so you know, um,
Yeah.
it really occupied a lot of my summer, and it's more of a labor of love because it's never going to sell that many copies. I think it's going to sell some more, as we come to the 20th anniversary and as people learn more about it and a few more reviews appear. There's a couple of different people now who are working on reviews. But I'm also working on an audiobook version, which is, this is coming in handy for that.
That's for people just listening. That's a microphone.
It's a microphone. Yes, it's a Rode microphone. It's not the best, but it's pretty good.
It looks professional. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. No, that's great. And not to get into the economics of self-publishing or anything, but I think I think you most
I just
likely
wanted
made the
to
right
get it out
decision
there. I don't really
economically.
care about making that much money. It would be nice to make money. I don't care about fame. If I really cared about fame and fortune, my career would look different, wouldn't it? So, yeah. I just want
Uh,
it out
okay.
there for posterity, essentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, sure. Um, Gosh, well, you talked about a lot of things there. Let me just move on, and I think we may end up getting into some of those issues. But so you talk a lot in the book about bias in
Yeah.
writing, and you make some good points, like that bias in what's supposed to be a straight factual article is morally wrong. That's your claim. And I think it makes sense because what you say is it insults the reader, basically. It's like I, the author, have access to all the information, and I've based my opinion on that. But you, the reader, are too dumb to reach that same conclusion. So I'm just going to present you with part of the information to make sure you come out with the right opinion. Um,
Right. That sounds like that's a pretty good statement of the argument. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that logic. It makes perfect sense. How big a problem do you think is bias on Wikipedia?
Well, it's enormous now, and it's gotten a lot worse in recent years. Um, I think Wikipedia marched to its own drummer from the beginning until about 2008 or so, 2010 maybe, um, in the sense that Wikipedia had a rather unique editorial policy that articles were not to take a recognizable stand, that you're to explain the debate rather than take a side in the debate, deciding who was the winner, who had credibility or authority according to the real experts and so forth. And Instead, we tried to represent all points of view, significant published points of view, um, and whether you were representing it in proportion to the expert opinion or in proportion to public opinion really kind of depended on the issue, the kind of the issue. If it's like an academic scientific issue, then you're talking about expert opinion. If you're talking about more public policy kind of things, and issues of geography, maybe, then you're talking about public opinion. And that was the rough idea of neutrality that was in place until, as I say, about 2008 and 2010. And then gradually, over the next 10 years, Wikipedia shifted, it seems, from thinking about neutrality according to that original policy to thinking of it as more or less the same thing as objectivity, in the sense that that mainstream journalists think about that, would tend to think about that. I mean, I'm not saying that they didn't have a neutrality policy and that it was called that and they continued to use it. It's just that there were little tweaks made to the policy. And there were habits that were introduced that made it clear that what they were really after was not fairly representing, in a way that you couldn't tell what the position of the authors of the articles were on issues of controversy, fairly representing all the different points of view on a controversy. Even if you're dealing with something that is radically disputed, even if you're dealing with pseudoscience or anything that has a lot of partisan bias involved. And so gradually Wikipedia came to represent instead sort of the mainstream point of view. So
right.
by about 2012 or 2015, there was basically Wikipedia could be relied upon to have a point of view that was roughly similar to the New York Times or the BBC. And then, right around the time, I think it predates Trump, although Trump made it, the whole Trump phenomenon, like, it probably made it worse, right? Basically, I think what happened was people started seeing the news media as an extension of, or following rather, the editorial standards of cable news, so that journalists started engaging in a lot more opinionizing, really openly. And
Sure.
I mean, that had been growing in popularity on cable news in Fox and MSNBC, but there was relatively little of that going on for a long time. And then it just started spreading. It started spreading into other networks, and you saw people just casually dropping their opinions into what were otherwise straightforward reporting. And it just got worse and worse. And after Trump came about, and there was this instant polarization where the news media became the opposition to Trump, and because the Republicans ended up on Trump's side, they became the opposition to Republicans, and then the news media itself became even more opposed, with the mainstream, relatively left-leaning media on the one side, Fox News, and a whole bunch of alternative news sources on the other side, little ones that are now growing. Wikipedia, the reason I'm going into all of this is that Wikipedia is part of that phenomenon. I think that people at Wikipedia must be thinking of themselves as sort of extensions of that thing. They take their cues no longer from the original habits that we had on Wikipedia. They take their cues from the news media. If they're writing a news article about some topic in science, they're going to take the same tone that they would find in an article like Science or the journal Science or Nature or Scientific American or whatever. And of course, those journals are all very opinionated. And that's okay. That's their right. But they're not encyclopedias, right? They're due to the nature of what they are, they're allowed to be neutral. Wikipedia is not. It's in a form that is expected to be neutral. That didn't stop the Wikipedians from basically absorbing that kind of policy from the publishing and broadcasting zeitgeist, basically. I really think that's what happened. And as a result, like I was just saying something that I had seen several years before when I wrote an article earlier this year, or last spring. I think I called it "Wikipedia is badly biased." I was thinking of putting it into the book, but whatever, I didn't. But it's on my blog. And there I basically I decided to go and just pick off some topics at random, more or less, except they weren't at random. I actually picked them as the most obvious places to look to see where there would be bias. So, okay, there's like the presidential candidates, for example, and other political figures. And then topics in religion and hot button topics in science and so forth. And everything that I looked at in any sort of depth had a very recognizable bias. It's not neutral at all. Stating all sorts of things as, all sorts of opinions as if they were fact. Now, in some cases, there's some generalizations made, like in an article about Jesus Christ. There's some generalizations and there's variations of opinion that are acknowledged, of course, and that hasn't changed, right? But there's whole categories of opinion that are just ignored. Even in an article about Jesus Christ, you really don't see like the fundamentalist, biblical, traditionalist points of view represented in the article. It's mostly academic. So it takes an academic point of view. Now, this is not to say that there aren't a lot of Reform and Lutheran and traditionalist Catholic theologians at divinity schools, because there are, and those people are basically just ignored as far as I can tell in the article. So when I say academic, what I really mean is sort of secular school academic, left academic, really. That's just an example, though. That's just one example. You actually have to look hard on certain topics to find articles that aren't really egregiously badly biased by 2005 standards.
Yeah. Well, you got at something interesting, I think, which is that bias is not necessarily the phrasing used. It's a lot of the time it's just what information is mentioned at all and what isn't. Yeah, right? I mean, I should preface, normally I do try to defend Wikipedia from people who say it's biased or unreliable, because I think Wikipedia editors overall really try to do a good job. But I mean, I definitely have to agree with you that there are examples of bias. I was thinking about it. I don't remember when I saw it, but I think overall the most embarrassing article I've seen on the English language Wikipedia is one called "Timeline of Russian Interference in the 2016 United States Election."
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen this one. It's so strange. I mean, the
I
timeline
did.
starts off in 1986, which is already a big warning sign.
Yeah.
And then it basically just seems to be a listing of every time Donald Trump or one of his employees or family members has met with a Russian person,
Right.
or talked about meeting Russian people, as far as I can
Yeah.
tell. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's any incorrect information in there, and actually everything is heavily cited, which actually I think makes it seem even crazier.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. And well, of course, they're not going to put any of the disconfirming evidence there on the subject either.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, right. That's the strange thing. They're not actually making any overarching point. This article isn't. It's just a listing, and I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
uncharitable
it's possible
statement is you're supposed to draw your own conclusions from that.
yes, it's absolutely possible to have a an unbiased, seeming from a certain point of view, article. It's all factual, sure, maybe, probably. There probably has some inaccuracies, I'll bet, but
Could be.
it doesn't. That doesn't really matter. The point is that it's the selection of the facts. I mean, everybody knows that if you've done any sort of scholarship at all, the selection of facts is one of the main ways that people use to make a biased or even propagandistic presentation of information. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in the Great Soviet Encyclopedia, I'm sure, that are 100% factual. It's just all the stuff that they leave out.
That's interesting.
So,
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And even out of context, something like this might be all right if there are corresponding, articles and going the other way. If there's a consistent guideline or a consistently enforced approach for all this kind of thing,
yeah,
potentially.
right. Yeah, and well, I mean, of course, Wikipedia has lots and lots of neutrality
Well,
guidelines.
okay,
It's
yeah.
even more than they have today. It's just that the guidelines tell them to do the things that they're doing to a great extent now. They even go so far as to contradict the original, or at least my original statement of the neutrality policy. So if I'm not mistaken, I have a bit there where I say that journalists talk about false balance, and we don't go in for that sort of thing here on Wikipedia. There is no such thing as false balance. It's just balance. Of course, it depends how to balance things is a big, really hard question. Neutrality is not easy. And sometimes getting something precisely neutral requires actually a lot of discussion and thinking through. Like, okay, what really is fair here? It's not obvious a lot of times. That's why there needs to be all of the sort of policies, perhaps. If there aren't policies, then there have to be a lot of people who are just wise and have good judgment about these things. Really good, fair reporters, just naturally, they understand these things. They've learned them. But Wikipedia goes in for the more activist point of view, the advocacy journalism point of view, that it's totally okay to advocate for a point of view by selecting the relevant facts, the ones that really matter. And of course, they'll defend that, and they'll be able to defend that actually by saying, well, none of our sources, none of our approved sources say any of the sorts of things that you want to say. So that's all just like, those are all unapproved sources. And that's how they can do it, right? While pretending to keep to the neutrality policy. all you have to do is just get rid of any sort of right-wing policy or right-wing publications, and also, and this is very important, get rid of primary source material when good secondary source material is available for you to cite. Okay, so if you allow people to cite the primary source material, which is often data, studies, and books that are written by experts that don't have an axe to grind, then it opens up the possibility for people who have ideological disagreements with the left. I mean, let's just put a name on it. It gives them ammunition, essentially, to get their point of view out there. And I'm convinced that one of the reasons why Wikipedia discourages the use of primary sources and strongly encourages, doesn't require, there's lots of primary sources in Wikipedia, I'm not saying that, but it discourages the use of primary sources and encourages the use of secondary, even tertiary sources, like literature reviews, for example, and whatever. Textbooks in some cases. All of that's okay. But yeah, the original sources, that requires too much interpretation. That's like original research, and that's off limits. So
you think it makes sense to use more primary sources, or it help get rid of some of the bias? Yeah.
Yes, I think it would. I think it would. I think that like in articles, for example, about Hillary Clinton, if they were to allow primary source material from dissidents working from, who were closely observing the players in, the Secretary of State's term when she was working in the Obama administration, and others who are observing, say, on the Podesta emails and whatnot, then those, if they were to put all of those things into the article about Hillary Clinton, it would be a lot more fair, but they're not going to. Part of that doesn't have to do with the sources, obviously. Part of it just has to do with plain old partisan bias and just not even following anything like the neutrality policy. But I think a lot of it does have to do with using only approved sources. They can, like, certain people, the only journals that they'll be able to get published in would be like conservative journals. And then when those people write some really substantive book based on firsthand information, based on archival research, for example, that book, I expect, will be, tossed out because, well, this person is not really credible. He only writes for sources when he's not writing books that are that are not approved for use by us. So, yeah. So, what can you do?
Right. Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. Sure. Yeah, it does seem one way to look at it is that the system has been gamed. Yeah. That's all right.
Knowledge is powerful. Let me just say one little quick thing here, because this is important, especially today. Knowledge we have learned in the last 4 years or so is extremely powerful. Trump has tried to rewrite a lot of, or call into question anyway, a lot of establishment narratives, establishment sources, of which I would include, among which I would include Wikipedia now. They get very upset at that And we know now that the policies that he has been advocating for, he's done that on the grounds of entirely different narratives that are very unpopular um, among establishment sources. Um, and if let's just say if you have a top 10 encyclopedia in which the people who are calling the shots are completely anonymous, if they want to be, don't you think that a lot of people are going to converge on that source and put in all kinds of time and money into making sure that it says what they want it to say? Just throwing that out there.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. Taking a step back a little, this bias only affects, I mean, whether or not it's a big deal, it only affects a relatively small percentage of articles, no? I mean, an article about the harpsichord is probably not going to have a big ideological slant.
Agreed. Yes. Yes. I think you're right about that.
Okay. And as far as Wikipedia's other than English, do you have any sense about bias, or there's similar issues or opposite issues or that kind of thing?
I don't know who to trust there because it's hard to read. Um, I I have tried to read from time to time, like the German and the French Wikipedias, because I know a little bit of German and a little bit of French. I can't. I don't know them well enough to come up with my own opinion. I have heard from people that they're all just the same as the English language, that they've also become biased, but I can't confirm it for myself, so I'm not going to make the claim myself.
Yeah, okay. I want to move on to expertise, your whole discussion about expertise, which is somewhat related and somewhat different.
Yeah.
You make an interesting point in one of your essays about expertise, which is there's sort of a contradiction in Wikipedia's approach. Obviously, the central idea is anyone can edit anything, so you have just as many rights if you're, a 10-year-old as if you're a college professor. There's no deference given to experts, as you note. But at the same time, every fact on Wikipedia is supposed to be cited with some reference that's, presumably written by an expert of one kind or another. So
that's right. Back when I was writing those essays, though, the first time, that wasn't they weren't nearly as anal as they are today about that. Actually, they've gotten a lot stricter. They really started becoming much stricter about citing sources by around 2010, 2012. But before that, there were all kinds of articles that didn't cite very many sources. And that was generally regarded as, well, okay for the most part. It kind of depended, actually. I mean, when there were disputes and so forth, or when the information didn't really represent the narrative as it was understood by experts who arrived on talk pages, then there would be flags raised. But it wasn't just due to the lack of sources cited. Anyway, so that's one of the reasons. Anyway, why don't you just finish the question? I think you're going to just say something else.
Oh, well, yeah, no, right. No, what you're saying is makes sense. It's true. I was just going to say, you did make a good point. I thought that, experts are given ultimate authority as far as being sources for information, but no authority when it comes to analyzing that information on Wikipedia itself.
Right. Yeah. It always struck me as amazing. There's another article that I wrote, which didn't make it into the book. Let's see if I've got it here. It's in this journal, Episteme, Journal of Social Epistemology. So I co-edited this. Um, my article is "The Fate of Expertise After Wikipedia," and basically, one of the things I say there, and I think in one of the articles in this book, is that experts it's ironic that experts are cited as sources, and yet when those very same experts or people just as well informed as them show up on Wikipedia, they can even be treated with contempt, especially if they have something critical to say. If they don't just fall into line and they don't like start making the proper obeisance to the right people, and there's a lot of that. I think even today, I think there's a little bit more respect paid to experts now, and there's people who have been. So I think Wikipedians have grown up a little bit in their attitudes. I think that's generally a good thing, but it also is reflected in the fact that only certain academic, mostly left academic experts are cited. And so, yeah, those people are now very welcome, and some of those people, if they want to take the time, they're given a platform for sure on the Wikipedia community. And so that problem, as far as that goes, is I wouldn't say it's exactly solved, but it's not as bad as it was when I was saying, when I was writing those essays. But there's related problems, though. A big part of the thing is there's because even today on a lot of subjects, because there is no role available for experts, and they aren't recognized for the most part as experts in fields. When they show up, they can be overruled, and they'll just. I've seen this happen many times over the years. Actually, somebody will come up and they'll tell me about this afterwards. I went in, and I'm like one of the world's top experts on this narrow topic. I went into the article about Wikipedia and I rewrote it, and it was good. It was professional. It had all sorts of sources. And then just slowly, actually different things have happened. In some cases, they just replaced the old article and said, no, you didn't get our permission to do this. In some cases, it will just slowly be picked at until it's distorted by amateurs. That continues to happen. I think the place where you can find experts really praising Wikipedia most, and where they find their views represented, is in the hard sciences and in programming and technology. Okay. But the reason for that is not hard to find. It's because what is known on those subjects, to a great extent anyway, is not a matter of controversy at all.
Right.
The same different textbooks are all going to give the same equations, for example, and they're going to give similar explanations of those equations. And different. There's just a fact of the matter of what the syntax of some programming language is. So Wikipedia, the model, without any role for experts, works in that sort of case. So, and that's good. Sure.
You hint somewhat at about, or maybe a little more than that, but in the book about modifying the Wikipedia structure to have a place for experts and deference. But before we get to that, well, it's tied in. But in 2006, you started a site called Citizendium
Yep.
to try to uh, to try to ameliorate, correct that imbalance, and the site is still running. Could you explain what Citizendium is?
Sure. Well, the idea was I and a lot of other people had gotten kind of disgusted with the state of Wikipedia by then, and decided that we wanted to try a do-over with a slightly different model. And the biggest ways, most important changes that we made to the Wikipedia model were we required real names, so no anonymous contribution. It was possible to get a pseudonym, but I or someone had to know who you were, right? And the other thing was and along with that, you had to prove who you were to some small extent. Like you had to, like, if you had a web presence somewhere, just put a link to the web presence. Yeah. That was very easy for people to do. So it wasn't a big ask. And then there were a couple of other things. We had a role for experts in the system. So you didn't have to be an expert to participate, and your edits were live immediately, just as on Wikipedia. But experts could, if they wanted to, take versions of articles and promote them into approved versions, which were outside of the mainstream of the article development. So so they would like take a snapshot and they say, okay, so this is the latest approved version of the article. And then we used Mediawiki templates in a very complicated way to like show those articles first if they were available. And then the other thing is we set on a governance system that was articulated in a charter, basically, and you had to agree to the charter. You had to agree to abide by the terms of the charter. And this is not terms of service, wasn't legal terms of service. It was more of, which would concern the relationship between the individuals and the owners of the website. No, this was an agreement among the participants with each other about how the community was to be developed and governed. So that charter was duly settled upon and so forth. The whole system, I think, was working quite well. The problem is we started it at the exact moment. If you look at Wikipedia's growth curve, it was at its steepest incline when we were taking off. And so it was taking off when we were trying to take off. It just basically sucked all the atmosphere out of the project. And then after a couple of years, I had to, find another. It's actually just 18 months probably. I had to start working more and more of my time on something that would pay the bills, because there weren't many people like donating to the project, and that was a shame. I'm sure I would have stuck with it full time if I had been able to raise the money for it, but I guess I never did. Actually, I thought I did, but the guy who gave the money for me, he was really asking me to do something else, and so I started working more for him, and that actually became WatchKnow, which became WatchKnow Learn, which is a directory of educational videos. which is cool in itself, but it's just mostly for teachers, really. Um, and then other things. So that pulled me away, and then Citizendium kind of. Um, I wouldn't say that it fell apart after I left, but the amount of participation on it kind of went down as my own participation went down. It's a shame, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't really think it could be helped. But people have been keeping it up, and even paying the hosting bills and so forth all this time. I recently gave ownership of it to someone. I'm not ready to make an announcement. I don't think that person is ready for me to make an announcement. But I don't think the group behind the site today will mind me saying that they're working their way up toward a relaunch under new sort of editorial policies, and I actually think they've got a chance of attracting a new revitalized community. I wouldn't necessarily say they're gonna beat Wikipedia at their own game at this point, but I think they have a really good chance of giving Citizendium a new lease on life, and that's a good thing. So the quality of sorry, did I say Wikipedia? Citizendium. So Citizendium is going to get a new lease on life, I think, and that's a good thing because the quality of articles on Citizendium are actually quite good, in my opinion. They tend to be written with a narrative point of view, but not necessarily a biased point of view. In other words, they make certain narrative choices about the order in which to present the information and so forth. So it sounds like it's written by a single person. In some cases it is. Sometimes it isn't, right? But like there's one sort of lead author, I guess you could say, who sets the tone. And that's one of the big differences, actually. It's another of the differences. And a lot of people who are still there, they like it for that reason. That's one of the reasons they tell me that they've sort of stuck with it. It's just easier to do high quality writing. So. Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't have to be one size fits all approach. That it doesn't have to be one wiki that that everyone consulted. Well, we'll get to that I think later with this encyclosphere concept. But
all right, okay.
Well, that's good to hear. As far as Wikipedia, does Citizendium point the way toward the structure that you think Wikipedia should have, or do you have something specific in mind that you think Wikipedia should do as far as giving more authority to academics and so forth?
No, I don't have any advice for Wikipedia on that at this point. I would have to, let's say there were like some crazy event that happened that somehow put decision-making authority in my hands over Wikipedia. I would just go back to the drawing board. I have no idea what I would come up with. Probably not Citizendium. I do know that there needs to be an article rating or approval process. I am also inclined to think that there should be multiple competing articles within Wikipedia. That was really unthinkable back in 2001, 2002. Today it is not. They have no excuse not to have multiple competing articles on the same topics. So that's one big change that I would recommend that they make.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned in the book a site called Pro-Con, something like that, which I guess takes that kind of approach.
Well, it's just that it's neutral. They don't have exactly different articles on the same topics. They actually,
Oh, okay.
for the
I should
most
have
part,
looked at
they
the site.
integrate the same information on the same pages, but they do make extraordinary efforts to keep their coverage of different debate topics essentially neutral. And they have a long and complex process. And the result is that the reader, if you go to procon.org and you actually try to figure out what you want to believe on any number of controversial issues, you are thrown back on your own resources. The issues are not decided for you. You have to make use of the resources that they give you, but ultimately it's up to you and what you want to do with them to decide what you're going to believe. My argument in favor of neutrality is that doing that respects the ability of free individuals essentially to decide what they want to believe, which I think is essential in democracy. I mean, how can you really have a robust democracy in which the opinions that people have that inform their votes are actually controlled from above? That the
Sure.
other option is that they're self-controlled. That requires that people be free individuals. That requires they use their own judgment. And it also requires that there be a media culture, essentially, in which there is this support, essentially, for people making up their own minds. And, well, that, of course, requires being fully exposed to all points of view fairly, truly fairly. In other words, in ways that will be recognized as fair by both sides. It's like, given that the other side has to have its share, its say, at least I can see that my side has been given a fair shake. And both sides need to be able to say that.
Yeah, sure. And the worst case is when you get one side and you're not even aware that you're just getting one side.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about something related to expertise, less about bias. Although, it relates to news, so it's also always about bias. But you talk in the book about how the basic disagreement between you and Jimmy Wales was about whether to give experts more of a say. That was at least one disagreement, and that was
Right.
a growing source of conflict between you and one of the factors that caused you to leave Wikipedia.
That's correct. It was one of the reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, well, there's a lack of funding and various other things, but
Well,
what's...
but the other thing was actually just the fact that he was allowing people that I at the time called trolls essentially to run rampant. And some of those people that I would have considered trolls or borderline trolls, they're definitely people who tolerated those really disruptive influences that just drove out bunches of good people. Some of those people ended up becoming Wikipedia administrators and essentially taking control of the thing. So, yeah, it was very problematic. Anyway,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, just offhand, it sort of it reminded me of some of those documentaries or things about communes in the '60s or whatever, and as people got added in, that you couldn't just they realized that you had to start making it more structured and so forth. Otherwise, these bad elements would end up taking over the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's just a fact of life. Yeah, but we were talking about
Yeah. So what's interesting is in the last few years, it seems like Jimmy Wales has maybe come around to your way of thinking. I mean, there's the Wiki Tribune project that he started in 2017, by now it's mutated into some kind of social network. But that's a different story. But it started out as a kind of hybrid wiki where volunteers and professional journalists were supposed to create news stories together in some way. I never really understood it, but it did compete directly with Wiki News, which is a Wikimedia site. So it does suggest that maybe Jimmy Wales now thinks that making use of experts is important, at least for certain types of content.
Right, I suppose.
I mean, do you have any thoughts on Wiki Tribune?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, it's gone the way of most amateur, especially volunteer journalism sites. There just hasn't been any that have succeeded yet, for whatever reason. It's very hard to do. I tried to do one myself, actually, and it was working. We just ran out of money and weren't able to scale. So anyway, yeah, it's a hard thing to do, but this is really a feature, not so much of any problem with involving experts. It's more of a problem of basically having amateurs do journalism. It turns out people don't realize this, that this is obvious to professional journalists, and I've worked with them enough to know that this is true, that journalism is hard. Doing journalism well requires training. It requires sort of an apprenticeship period. And the thing that makes it hard, I think, is that it requires the ability to very quickly track down sources, to discern what the facts are in the case, because they have to figure it out for themselves. They're not usually, if they're original journalism, which, okay, granted, most of them today don't. But if you're doing real substantive original journalism, then you have to quickly track down the sources. You have to summarize it, and you have to do it quickly and accurately, and that is not easy, especially the accurately part. It's just so easy to get little things wrong. And then all of those problems to which journalism is susceptible just becomes worse when you do what used to be called citizen journalism. And so this isn't a criticism of Jimmy Wales' project in particular. It's just a feature of citizen journalism or crowdsourced journalism. It's the only thing that I think along those lines that is going to work ultimately is aggregating the news. And that's different from actually doing the news. Actually, in other words, crowds might be relatively good at picking the news, and they also might be good at summarizing bits of the news as long as their work can be edited. So one of the areas in which Wikipedia is relatively good, actually, and has been for a long time, is that it's good at summarizing the recent news, because it just aggregates so many different sources and makes a fuller, more complete story. Of course, if they limit the sources as they do now, then it's only going to be part of the story, which is a separate problem. But that might be the only kind of journalism that can be crowdsourced. That again, and basically picking the top stories.
Oh yeah, sure, right. Yeah, there's a whole category of bias there, just in terms of what shows up on page one and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's sort of what Wiki News is supposed to be, is aggregating news articles.
Yeah.
all that. Well, yeah,
They
yeah.
actually try to do journalism, though.
Well, yeah.
Wikinews,
There's also that, right, right.
yeah. I mean, not only do they use original sources, but they also they do the sort of thing that journalists do when they read somebody else's story, and then they sort of rework the sources and they rework the description of what's going on, and that's a different thing from just summarizing what it says, you
Sure.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, no, sure. Yeah, yeah. Journalism is hard, especially with the it's hard to make money off of it. Of course, in the last 10, 20 years. But um, um, so yeah, I wanna obviously talk about this encyclosphere idea, which ties into all of this, a lot of the stuff we've talked about. And that's how you end the book, or that's the last big idea that you offer in there. And I think it's actually something that a lot of people listening to this podcast might find relevant, because there are a lot of people out there running their own public wikis on various subjects. Could you explain the plan for the encyclosphere?
Okay, absolutely. So back when I was working on something called Watch No Learn, I I developed this system for organizing videos into categories and then having people who visited the site um, to rate the videos within the categories, and then they would be placed. The videos would be placed within rank order. Um, so some years pass, and I got into a more for-profit entrepreneurial frame of mind between about 2013 and 2015. I've since gone back to the nonprofit space, though. Um, and it was around that time that I had this notion that why aren't we doing something similar for encyclopedia articles? Um, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought this is actually a good and needed idea, for the simple reason that, you know, as I looked at various also rans for encyclopedia projects that were just struggling, including Citizendium, um, I thought maybe the problem really is that there is any community at all. Maybe what we need is not a specific community to build an encyclopedia,
Right.
because that it doesn't matter how open and broad the community is, it's going to have some nature, which is going to leave out a bunch of people. And I think Wikipedia, you know, for all its faults, might, at least in the earlier days, might have been like as close as we could come to having a really maximally globally open sort of project for organizing an encyclopedia. And of course, it's just gotten narrower and narrower for various obvious reasons. Okay, so the what there needed to be then is not a particular app, a particular website at all. There needs to be a network. Um,
Right.
so why don't we, I thought, just identify all the encyclopedia articles online and put them in on a particular subject, put them on a single page, and let people rate them. And then we'll surface the best article, and then there are iterations of that idea. One iteration is we need to allow people to add articles that are like just one-offs. Like I put an article about something I happen to know about, and I only know about one thing. I put it on my blog, and there it is. It's the best article in the world about it, but nobody's ever going to see it because it's just on my obscure blog. Now that's a problem. I ought to be able to submit that to this catalog, this database of encyclopedia articles. Um, and it should be able to just jump right to the top if the community of raters um, submits the or rather ranks it high. And then I thought, wait a minute, this is going to be a problem, isn't it? Because um, if if there is a community of raters, that means that I'm just dealing with another instance of the same thing, but maybe on a meta level, right? It's still going to be a community. And then I thought, oh boy, what I really need to do is I need a protocol. I need something where we can spread out all of these articles and we can spread out all of the ratings. And then I thought, well, that's just like the blogosphere. It's very similar to the blogosphere. And the more I studied it, the more I realized and learned actually properly, finally, for the first time, maybe, about the joys and wonders of, decentralized networks. For people who have run nodes of such networks, this is natural. Like if you're really old school and you ever ran a Usenet server, I forget what they were called, then this would be an example of that. Or you could have like an IRC hub that running on your server, people could connect to the broader IRC through your hub, that sort of thing. And I thought, well, those are all based, all of those technologies, email itself, the internet, the whole domain name system is a decentralized network. All it is a protocol people use, and then they broadcast different things online, and people are able to process it on their computers or their devices as being all of the same or parts of the same network because they're all using the same protocols. So whether it be email or messages or whatever, blogs. Encyclopedias should be another instance of the same. Okay, so I promoted this idea for a couple of years as part of my work as CIO of Everipedia in 2018 and 2019. Everipedia is the blockchain encyclopedia, not an encyclopedia about blockchain. It's an encyclopedia on the blockchain, and it's a fork of Wikipedia, but they've added boatloads of their own articles, especially about like popular topics of internet memes and people who are internet famous and so forth.
Okay.
So they've got actually a lot of articles, more than Wikipedia in the English language Wikipedia, so we talked a lot about Everipedia doing it. I think they're still committed to being involved and participating. But I decided what really needed to happen is if it's going to take off in a meaningful way, then we would have to have buy-in from other encyclopedias. Like Britannica, for example, is not just going to build their stuff build a decentralized presence on the network of a competitor. Right. Even though it's a decentralized network, the Everipedia network is decentralized. Nevertheless, right now, it's more or less controlled by the Everipedia crew. And so, again, I came back to the same old thing. It really needs to be a network, a real bona fide decentralized network, not controlled by anyone. And I thought in order for that to happen, there has to be basically a nonprofit that controls the development of the standards that are used to share encyclopedic content, right? So Uh, Last fall, so actually this would be fall of 2019, I left Everipedia in order to start the Knowledge Standards Foundation. So, and I didn't have any funding. I was just at first just using my own runway savings from Everipedia, actually, um, and and made some good headway developing a community and a blog, and we started talking about things. But then I ran out of money, so I had to go into consulting for a while, and then some money for the Knowledge Standards Foundation, as it's called, showed up. It showed up not too long ago, and so we have since incorporated the nonprofit. We are hopefully this week going to be applying for 501c3 status. That should be happening very soon anyway. We have a 3-member board. We've got over 1,900 people on the mailing list now.
Oh, wow.
We've got like a dozen active volunteers and another 2 or 3 dozen people sort of waiting in the wings. I could call on them and ask them to do things anytime if I wanted to, but I've been sort of cooling my heels a little bit, so that the website gets ready and the donation system gets ready. In order for the donation system get ready, at least we had to be incorporated and have a bank account. So all of that is set up finally. And so now we are in a position, and by the way, some people have actually started writing software for as part of this project.
Okay.
Yeah, one guy he started developing requirements. Another one developed a very nice discussion of the architecture, his proposals for the architecture of the network. He's a high-powered network engineer. Another guy has submitted some edits to the W3C's DID-Web protocol. It's the distributed identity protocol. Basically, it's owning your own identity hosted. Now, originally it was going to be hosted on a particular blockchain. Now it doesn't have to be hosted on a particular blockchain. After my colleagues' submissions to the protocol, you can actually host it on any ordinary web URL, just your own web space. And various other. My son has built a little meta search engine for encyclopedias, which is pretty cool.
Oh, neat.
And then, so we're actually getting busy. And in January, maybe February, I'm thinking, we are going to be starting a seminar. Basically, I'm going to hit up various people that I know and a bunch of other people I think we won't have trouble getting a yes from, to speak about different questions that must be answered in order for the network to be developed properly. So things like, so how do we build a decentralized network? And another one would be, what sort of markup should we choose, if any, for the content? Or maybe we should just not specify a content markup and let people use, Mediawiki markup or HTML or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So there's the markup language wars to engage in a little bit, and then all kinds of other things like, do we want to have any manner of editorial layer on the network itself?
Right.
If so, why? And how would it work? And how could it possibly work and actually remain as robustly decentralized as all of those other true decentralized technologies are. Um, it's like, well, you have to have some sort of anti-spam, anti-garbage um, protocol. So how do you do that exactly?
Yeah,
And
right.
and do you actually want to? And exactly, it has to happen somewhere, right? But then at what level? At what part of the network does it occur? So there's a zillion questions. Some of them are purely technical, and some of them are actually less technical and more, once you understand the technology, it actually becomes more of a political thing, not a left right political thing,
Sure.
but who has the power political thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so, yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that seminar. I mean, the we're going to collect some donations. We will strongly encourage donations for people who are participating, but it will be free. Um, and it's not going to be pay for play in any way. We're not going to accept any money, by the way, from publishers or from the usual big Silicon Valley corporations. Think of them as like government level, um, government sized corporations. We're not going to take money from them. And we're also not going to, we'll take money from SMEs probably if they check out, if they seem decent. And we'll also accept money from of course, individuals, again, who check out. So the guy who gave us 100,000 for startup, I checked him out. I flew out to his place and met with him, talked with him for 24 hours, and that
Yeah.
was I had a great time. And I can tell you, as far as I can tell, I've done my due diligence,
Yeah.
and he's a decent guy. Um, and I want to do the same thing basically for all donors, or we'll go with small donors, but we're not going to do the sort of thing that Wikipedia has done. Wikipedia had the right idea at the very beginning. I remember Jimmy Wales saying this. He said, "We don't really want to take government money." I remember him saying that. "We don't really want to take money from big corporations. We want to take small donations that keeps us independent and it keeps us responsible to the people." And he was right. That's correct. And that's how it should be. And that's basically what I intend to do. And if it means that I have to do this as a hobby, and find some work doing something else, I guess that's how it will have to be. If it is a 100% volunteer organization, that's how it will have to be. This stuff is just too important. The problem is, we have discovered that knowledge is, of course, we've known for a long time, it's proverbial that knowledge is power. But now we know that when people said that knowledge is power, what they meant was narratives drive the world, and it's true. We know
Yeah.
it now.
Sure.
And who drives the narrative is the thing that is the source of power. So if you really want to to have more epistemic democracy, which I would be in favor of, then if you want to give the epistemic power to the people, essentially, then the way that you organize people cannot be paid for and governed by big money interests. It has to be governed by representatives of the people, and people who are 100% committed to principles of basically keeping things free, keeping things neutral, and basically making a robust network that will never be co-opted by corporate and government interests. So that's what
Yeah.
we'll try. I guess I can't make any promises because I don't know how it is possible to promise such a thing, but I'm going to do everything that I can to keep that, to make that the case as long as it can be true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's certainly at the intersection of a bunch of hot button issues right now.
yeah,
With its bias in journalism or the control that tech companies have over everyone's lives or their political involvement and all that. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, well, just from a technical perspective, a lot of it sounds like RSS. RSS is to blogs as what you're doing is to encyclopedia articles, that kind of thing,
yeah,
potentially. Yeah.
right,
Okay.
right. So we're going to want to talk to some RSS and Atom experts at some point in the seminar. Um, we've already investigated for ourselves and talked to one or two people who are experts to know that RSS itself will not work. That there's just too many differences between a blog um, and a blog post and a whole encyclopedia and encyclopedia articles.
Yeah.
Um, and there's just a lot. I think the encyclopedia protocol is going to have to be a little more complicated, um, and hopefully not too much more. But there's a lot to be learned from studying RSS, so that's what we're going to do. I've looked
Yeah.
into it
Okay.
myself a fair bit.
Yeah.
So
Um, Yeah, I was. Oh, I also want to say I'm glad you moved off of the rating idea, because a lot of this there isn't necessarily a one size fits all approach for encyclopedia articles anyway. Yeah, I mean,
but I haven't moved off the rating idea.
yeah, okay, yeah,
Just
yeah,
haven't. I haven't told you the conclusion that I came to with respect to that. So, I don't know if this is going to work. I hope it will. It's kind of ambitious, so maybe it'll never see the light of day. But it would work like this, basically. If you've got a distributed system of identity, of self-owned identity, like if I can go to larrysanger.org and upload my identity file, which I confirm with a key pair is mine, according to the DID protocol. If I can do all of that, then I can also make various claims about myself in that identity. And then other people can essentially respond using the same encyclosphere network protocols, but now talking about user features. They can confirm or disconfirm various claims that I make, about myself, kind of like LinkedIn does, right? So, like, you can claim to be an expert about JavaScript or something like that, and then other people will say, "Yep, he's an expert about JavaScript," and you've got like 30 endorsements or something like that. So I can see something like that happening. In some cases, it's going to be completely uncontroversial. Like, if I say that if I claim to be a conservatarian, I'll bet a bunch of people, even people who disagree with me politically, will endorse that claim about myself, right? If I claim that I have a
yeah,
PhD, there's a lot of people who will say that's true, and so forth. And then, okay, if we've got a system in which people can sort of publicly share and confirm information about themselves, then we combine that with rating data, which is also shared in a decentralized way, according to a decentralized protocol. You own your own ratings. You own the ratings that you make, the set of all the ratings that you make of particular versions of particular articles. You own that. All right. And then the idea is aggregators grab all of that ratings data and data about the raters, and then they slice and dice it. It makes it possible then to surface the top rated article about the topic God according to Jews, or according to Christians, or
I
according
see.
to
Okay,
Yeah.
Right, right.
And that would be really interesting, I think. I mean, extremely interesting, especially if you can actually get people to go to the trouble of making ratings and publishing their ratings in this way. If you can actually get people to use such a system, then you can easily imagine how there would be this massive worldwide competition to have the top rated article on each topic. And ultimately, that would be like the top prize, according to everybody who's in the system who is recognized as being somehow legit, according to some standards of legitimacy. This is the top rated article. But there's also all of the top rated articles according to people who think the way that you do. So, like, if I'm like a Lutheran, and I'm rating articles about God, I'm going to be interested to see what the top rated article about God is according to Lutherans. Or if I'm a Hasidic Jew, I will, again, it'll be very interesting to see what the top rated article there is. And then here's an interesting thing. You can operationalize the idea of neutrality. You can say, what is the top rated article about God from a neutral point of view, or considered neutrally, what is the top? Well, I suppose a way you could operationalize that is by saying, okay, we are going to take 1,000 votes from the top, I don't know, 7 religions in the world. And so, or we're going to weight the representatives of the top 7 religions of the world equally. And then we're going to see, according to that weighted rating, what is the one top rated article about God according to all of the religions taken together, where Christianity has one, Judaism has one, atheists have one, and whatever.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really interesting then. You know, it would create all these new insights about the world. The fact that there would be this sort of peer-reviewed, open, decentralized competition to represent the best of the world's knowledge. But it isn't going to happen unless it's truly decentralized, because I'll tell you this, people rating an encyclopedia article is hard. First of all, you have to actually read an encyclopedia article, and most encyclopedia articles are boring. They're not very well written. And even the ones that are interesting, because the topic is interesting and or because they're well written, it actually is, yeah, if you want to do a good job and be conscientious and not poorly represent your own opinions, you actually have to think about it, and you'll want to do it on several dimensions. You won't just want to rate the overall global rating. You'll want to rate it on things like accuracy and completeness and who knows what, bias, lots of different dimensions. And that will take time. So the only way that people are going to go to that trouble, it seems to me, is if they, you know, they have reason to think that their work is going to continue to be able to be used by many other people, and yet it isn't benefiting any one party, especially any one party that can abuse it. In other words, if the whole network of rating is just owned by Google or something like that, then it's not going to work. I don't know if you remember, about 10 years ago, maybe over 10 years ago now, Google experimented with this little project where when you do a web search, it would pop up a little ratings system, buttons or whatever, for each website that came up.
I vaguely remember that, yes.
And they just discontinued that after about a month, I believe. Or anyway, it wasn't around for very long. I don't know what happened to that project, but it was taken down pretty quickly. It is pretty obvious why. because I mean, who's gonna like just give Google their rating data in that way? Why should Google have exclusive control over that rating data?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is a whole technical field. Well, I don't know if it's a whole field, but a whole technical challenge in and of itself is the whole concept of decentralized ratings and
Yeah,
decentralized reviews. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it opens up a lot of possibilities if such a thing can actually exist. Yeah,
yeah. And
and
if there's one reason why it hasn't existed yet, in my opinion, I mean, of course, people have tried to make things that operate like that, but they're centralized in various ways. Like Goodreads, for example, it's like it's not it's still centralized. Um, it's just because it's nonprofit, for example, or whatever, does not mean that it's going to solve all the problems that we're trying to solve with such a system. No, the reason is because people don't own their own data, and the
yeah,
reason they don't own their own data is because they don't own their own identity. You can't own your own data unless you own your own identity, and you can't own your own identity unless there is a decentralized identity protocol.
yes,
That is the thing that is needed. The basic uh, prerequisite requirement for a lot of the sort of true peer-to-peer um, Web 3 or Web 4, whatever,
whatever. I don't know.
um, sorts of systems. So,
Yeah, so you'd have to so that's a second protocol you'd have to create unless such thing exists already.
what's that?
So that's a second protocol you'd have to create unless there already is a identity protocol of some kind.
Well, That's why I was mentioning the W3C's DID.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
the DID protocol. It exists now. Not a lot of people are using it, um, but I think there's a good chance that it's going to take off, and um, we'll see. I
Yeah.
just hope that it doesn't somehow get co-opted by Google or the U.S. government or Amazon or whatever, because it easily. I'm not saying it easily could. If it's a neutral technical protocol, then it's actually hard for them to do that. But there's different ways they can do it. Like I just remember what a betrayal it was when essentially Google took over Usenet. Essentially, that's what they did. Made Google Groups out of it, um, and and then it still exists. Yeah,
There
not really.
yeah, oh gosh, I
They
haven't seen
shut
a
it down,
Usenet
basically.
address. Yeah, okay, yeah. I haven't seen a Usenet
They
address in
basically
a long
shut
time.
it.
Yeah. Um yeah, Usenet was great back in the day. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about. You talked in the book about social networks. We haven't really talked about it in this discussion, but potentially that kind of approach could help solve a lot of the problems that you point to with social networks. You know, if you
Yeah,
can just write out your update anywhere and then have it just displayed in those places, then that's a very different proposition
yeah,
than them owning whatever you just wrote.
yeah. I've been so there. I do talk about that in the last section of the book a fair bit. Everything that I've said about decentralized networks applies with a few small changes to social media networks. And I've been using some of my Knowledge Standards Foundation time um, to to advocate and to help with that. Um, so the seed donor or benefactor of the Knowledge Standards Foundation has agreed to put up some money to develop a true peer-to-peer um, uh, social media standard, um, and
Yeah.
One guy, one gent, let's see if he actually makes the time to do it. I sure hope he does. But one gent has said that he's going to create a nonprofit and take him up on his offer. He actually has to do a little work before he can actually claim the money, I think. Um, but I think it's going to happen. There's people who try, and there are things that they're not peer to peer. It's more server to server, like the Mastodon network, which is built on ActivityPub, um, and that's cool. I'm glad it exists, and people have obviously been working on it for a long time, and they're passionate about it, but they're not worried enough about the fact that it's still centralized at the server level and that it isn't peer to peer. You really do want it to be peer to peer. And if it's going to be peer to peer, that means that the system that's used for aggregating the data that spread across all of these different individuals' websites, uh, it has to be via some shared network. And well, I guess that has to be something like torrent, doesn't it? Some people have been developing a number of blockchain solutions for this, but I'm very sorry to have to say I've been soured a little bit on the idea of using blockchain for things like this, for mainly because it doesn't it's something that I came to based on experience, not a priori. It's that the people who start the blockchains tend to control and retain control of the blockchain, and
That's interesting.
yeah. So it is really difficult for such systems to avoid being centralized. And the way that the economics of the thing work often is it's just too possible for whales for whales to just buy up the network, or
Oh, that
large
kind of whales. Sorry. Yes. Right. Sure.
controlling interest. Yes, that kind of whale, blockchain whales, that crypto whales, people who own enough of the tokens on a particular blockchain to basically dominate all the voting. They can swing every vote. So yeah, it's so
Yeah.
I think we are going to end up, if we're going to have any such social media network, it's probably going to have to be built on torrent, um, or something like it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I knew more about torrent, but
worried about it, you say?
I wish I knew more about it. That's all. I
Oh
don't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, it's old technology now, you know. It hasn't changed that much, although ways of interfacing with it have. So now we've got WebTorrent. You can actually interact with torrent networks via a web protocol. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And we actually might be using that in this. I'm advising the group that is talking about taking up the funders on his offer to fund the development of this sort of protocol for social media. But yeah, that's just a very small side thing for me. It's something. It's like, as a social media user, I feel like that's something I've got to do. Last
Yeah.
summer, summer of 2019, I I published a Declaration of Digital Independence, which I have included in this. It's
Right.
chapter 11, um, and when I put that out there and tried to get a bunch of people to sign it, um, uh, I went on a 2-day social media strike, and I told everybody else to do the same. And there, it is actually a reasonably big deal. There was quite a bit of news coverage, and a lot of people did it. Um,
Yeah, I
and
remember that actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we'll end up doing something similar again, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm just excited. This is what I want to exist. I want to be able to go to my WordPress blog, install an extension that enables me to, instead of being given this big form, it just has for a whole encyclopedia, or rather for a whole blog post, rather. It just has, 280 characters, whatever, available. Um, and then it's got a feed of all the people that I follow, and the feed is populated by other people who have similar extensions across the blogosphere, and also my feeds from Twitter and Facebook and so forth. So I just sort of instruct the extension to check in occasionally and grab stuff from my various social media feeds, and I can just monitor and participate in a much broader social media network.
Sure. Right.
From one place that I control, and nobody can shut me down or censor me, right?
Yeah.
The government could, okay, but
Well,
that's actually what matters. I mean, ultimately.
yeah, right. Yeah, as long as there's one set of rules and not, a thousand sets of rules, some of which are not even written down. It's just, whatever the whims of the companies are that day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's there's definitely a need and a desire for that kind of thing. I guess it would sort of bring back the web to what it was in the 90s. I mean, yeah, I hope this is the catalyst that enables that well, at least for encyclopedias, if not the beginning of something for the social media also.
Yeah.
If people want to,
Working
yeah,
on it hard. I can guarantee this. We will spend the next 12 months or so, and probably longer than that, um, really hashing out all of the features that will be needed for a decentralized encyclopedia network. And if the nonprofit that I've started doesn't develop it, and I think we will, somebody is going to do it. It's just an idea whose time has come.
yeah. If people want to join the organization or contribute in some way, how do they do that?
You go to encyclosphere.org,
Yeah.
and depending on when people listen to this, they will, if it's very soon, they'll just see a sign up form. So drop us your name and email address, and we'll add you to the mailing list. Of course, we're not going to spam you or sell anything. We're just going to try to get you involved in the project. And there will be links to that are available to the Slack group, to the and we might be moving off Slack eventually. By the way, that's just what everybody seems to like to use at this point. Anyway, and also things like our blog and a forum, and yeah. If you're interested in this seminar, it's basically, you could think of it as a master class, graduate level seminar. It should be acceptably technical to the technically minded, but it also should be accessible to the non-technical. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that'll be early next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll tell you all about it if you join the list.
Uh, yeah. Okay. Great. Well, that seems like a good place to end this.
Wait, there's one
Oh,
thing that I wanted to ask you to do if you're interested,
sure.
because you actually are a media wiki programmer. Um, we need a plugin for MediaWiki. Um, what we want to do is we want to be able to export the um, the content of a wiki encyclopedia. Um, we want to be able to export it in a common format.
Right.
Create a not just a database dump, but structured data that can be shared. Um, Obviously, you would need the standards, right, in order to the specification.
Right.
But
Right.
you can help develop it, maybe, and you can just
Yeah.
make a first. If you were to make a first stab, you might have to change some of the field names and whatever. Um, and then that would give us an idea, and then ultimately, what I imagine happening if after you've done this, somebody could export the articles from Wikipedia and Ballotpedia and all the hand wiki. And how many wiki encyclopedias are there now? There's a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sure. Sure.
you
I mean, yeah.
put them all together, and you wouldn't just. I mean, it should be possible to export just the metadata and not the article content. Um,
Right.
but it'd be nice if you could also export the article content. Um, and if then presumably what somebody could do is just like create a big honking database, um, and or maybe just a few people would make the databases and then have an API that other people could build apps off of. And this, I imagine, could be sort of the backbone of the future network because so many encyclopedias online, Wikipedia as well as also rans, are written in Citizendium is another one, of course. They're written in MediaWiki. So all we need
Yes.
is just a way to export the data and also to create a stream of recent changes that is formatted according to the same standard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't sound technically that complicated. I mean, in a sense, I mean, I've already written an extension called data transfer that just lets you get the contents of different pages in XML format as one
Cool.
big XML file. Um, yeah, I mean, well, we can talk about it. I mean, obviously, it would be easier to do once there is a standard in place. Um, but if the idea is just to, I don't know, if, is it useful to have something like that ahead of time to just to see what that would look like, or is this something for the future?
Well, think of it like supporting my 14-year-old son who wrote that encyclopedia meta search engine. So if he had the ability to just like export, a data dump of all the articles from like a dozen different wiki encyclopedias, then he could actually, instead of just just using their search capabilities, he could
Yeah.
build his own search engine for all of the encyclopedias. It would be faster. It would be um, you could do a lot more with it because all of the data would be there, and then it would actually start to make sense for him or others to add ratings to it, right? And the idea is then we'll actually start thinking about. So my point anyway is that just think of it as a very necessary and absolutely essential component of the future encyclosphere network. I mean, we know
Right.
we want to be able to export the data and also to create a data a formatted data stream, basically a feed like RSS for so.
Yeah.
Yeah, XML might be okay. If you really are interested in this, please come to our Slack channel and our Slack group. Go to the dev channel and just like and we can talk about things like XML versus JSON or
Right.
whatever. And
Yeah, because
other
of course the Mediawiki already has the built-in XML export feature, which you mentioned the XML dumps and stuff.
right. So then
Yeah,
we just need to sort of like develop a standard based on such things, and then rewrite the tools so that they're consistent with the standards.
yeah. Cool. Well, there's there's me. There's a bunch of MediaWiki developers listening to this. So yeah, between all of us, I think you should be able to find someone to do it.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to contribute to this effort. All right. Yeah. Well, great. We covered a lot of stuff. So yeah, if for those listening, I'll do it NPR style. My guest has been Larry Sanger. The project is the Encyclosphere. The organization is the Knowledge Standards Foundation, and the book is Essays on Free Knowledge. And Larry,
Website.
what?
The website.
Oh, the what is the website? And the website is. Oh,
Encyclosphere.org.
okay, yeah, .org, yeah. And if for people who want to get the book, should they go to your website?
Well, there's links on larrysanger.org, but yeah, you can just search for it on Amazon or Gumroad for. I get paid a little more if you buy the ebook from Gumroad. It's the same files.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think that's what I did actually. Great. Well, Larry, it's been a real privilege to talk to you, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been good. I appreciated your questions. It's nice to be able to talk to an expert who actually understands some of the technical issues that we're having to deal with. So,
Thank you. And this has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Larry Sanger. Check out the book, the organization, and the website. Thanks to all of you for listening. Stay productive, and I'll see you next time.